Right, for the most part, a lot of companies are actually going through transformation of some sort. It's a merger, it's an acquisition. I'm going to cloud computing. There's transitions of I'm integrating organizations, offshoring, outsourcing. Those are all different types of transformations. So the challenge really is that if you think about what it takes to do a transformation, there's strategic planning to decide how to do it. There's my assets, which is portfolio management. Then there's how do I operationalize that? So if I have a strategy, and we'll just talk a little bit about a simple thing like vacation. If I'm going on vacation, there is a decision to be made of a direction. Do I want to be cold? Do I want to be hot? If I'm going to be cold, I'm going to be skiing. So that's that business direction that I'm going to set. Then I have a system of assets, which we call portfolio management. So what do I have? If I decide I'm going to go cold, I'm going to go skiing, then I have to look at what are all the assets that I have. Do I have skis? Do I have a car to get me transportation? All that kind of stuff. If you think about that, then I want to operationalize how I'm going to use those assets. So if you think about from a perspective of, I have a ski coat. I haven't been skiing in 10 years, so my daughter looks at it and says, you can't wear that. Well, that means I bring another important asset to bear, which is my credit card, and go out and buy a new ski card. So the challenge is, how do you line that all the way up? Because once you operationalize it, then I have to deploy it. The other challenge is that as a decision occurs, you have a senior officer of the company is going to say, I want to go skiing as a business direction. That then becomes the problem of the next layer, which is where, how, why, which then becomes another problem of how do I deploy that, driving, which becomes managing it. So making sure that all works. I mean, right now they actually have in transformation, they say 70% of all large initiatives fail. So that means you only have 30% right now succeeding, because it's very hard to drive through that, because you have multiple different practices, multiple people, it's a very complex scenario. We first started by defining that dynamic and putting together a framework. And then what we've done is we're then taking from that, we're building what's called practice areas. So strategic planning or business architecture or enterprise architecture is a practice area, which is not a practice, but it says here's the things that you would do underneath that. So for instance, under enterprise architecture, you may have TOGAF as a practice, or you could have DODAF as a practice, or you could have ZACMAN as a practice. Or most companies will take those and integrate them and come up with a hybrid, taking the principles and create their own practice. If we build that, Provision enables you to then take across all those different practices, build methodologies, for instance, process modeling. If I use this methodology for process modeling underneath the enterprise architecture or the business architecture, I could then use that for process design, which could then go to software development, which then could go to solution architecture, which then goes to operation management. So by integrating all those practices, you eliminate the fact that if I re-engineer a process and go out and map a process, I then give that process to the technology people. They say, no, I have to go back out to the customer and remap that process. And then you give that to the application developer, then he gives that to the technology. No, I have to go remap of the process because you didn't grab all the information. So it allows you to basically make that all seamless throughout. Yeah, because if you have the software tool is very flexible, and it allows you to put multiple practices. It'll do TOGAF, it'll do DODAF, it'll do ZACMAN, it'll do balanced scorecard, it'll do the MIT Delta model, it'll also do Six Sigma, it'll do Lean. But the fact is, you have to, to be successful, you have to pick a framework. You have to make the decision. Am I going to be a Lean shop? Am I going to be a Six Sigma shop? Along with that comes a vocabulary, and it comes with methodologies and techniques. Those techniques have to also integrate with the business architecture or the enterprise, which says we're going to be, because underneath the enterprise architecture, you're still going to deal with processes. So are you going to use the same terms, the same measurements? What's the vocabulary? So you have to go through that and rationalize that. The tool will give, its flexibility is enough that allows you to do that, but you still have to have that framework, and you still have to have modeling knowledge. The tool allows you to build the model, but you have to understand how to build the model and what's the problem you're trying to solve, and what's the best model to use to develop that. It really looks at all the different practices, and there's two levels of assessment that we look at. One is the practice level. So if you think about framework, practice area, practice, we assess that. Do you have all the practices? Do you have strategic planning in place? Do you have something? And it doesn't have to be called strategic planning. It could be called business direction development. It could be called planning, whatever, business planning. It doesn't matter what it's called, but there's a function that says you're going to do some sort of planning. Do you have that available to you? because that's going to pass off to business architecture. If it's not business architecture, it's also been called strategic deployment team. So the name is not the matter, but you have to think about the function that occurs. So it allows you to identify those and see if you have the gaps at that practice level. Then the next level down, the second tier of the assessment is the practice, methodology, technique. So have you picked a methodology and process line that's going to satisfy all those different practices? Can you influence that? You know, there's not one methodology that can do everything, but at minimum, can what I do here get passed off to the next level that they could add on to it versus starting over?